Alright, hey guys, I'm going to demo our first project for you. This project is relatively simple. It's just to get you guys experimenting with clay and experimenting with adding textures to clay. I think it's an easy project to start with, whether you are working in the classroom or you are working at home. Alright, a few things that you're going to need. You're going to need your popsicle sticks, a pair of scissors, a straw or something round that you can punch out a hole. And then I want you to look around your house and look for things that you can use to make textures. Not necessarily something that somebody's going to get mad at you for using, but simple things. This is a pen cap. I like to use the top of the pen cap to create sort of a raised hole. I saw this marker as I was looking for my pen cap, and it had some interesting texture on the top, so I'll see what happens when I use that. And this is just a regular pen, and it has a circle at the top. Each one is going to give me a different texture, so I'm just going to experiment and play around and see what I like. Alright, the first thing you need to do, the first decision that you're going to have to make is you want to cut the tip of your popsicle stick. I gave you guys a couple in case you mess up, but you could certainly keep cutting it down so that you don't go through a bunch of popsicle sticks. You could also use both sides, create different textures, and use the popsicle stick to make a variety of textures. So I'm just gonna cut it into a point. And I just want to make it even. Alright, so I just cut that side into a simple point. The other side, I'm going to do a couple of different points. So you could, if you wanted to be more exact, you could draw out so that you know exactly what you're cutting. Please be careful not to cut yourself. Alright, so I made sort of like, can you see, little 3 points on the one side and 1 point on the other side. Get rid of any of your wood scraps. You don't want to get them into your clay. They would just burn out in the kiln, but they'll leave a little funny mark. Alright, so I just have a little hunk of clay here. You have to figure out how big you want each of your pieces to be. One thing that happens with clay, as it goes into the kiln, it shrinks. So I'm just going to roll it into a ball. So the clay in the kiln will shrink with each firing. So if you make something a little larger than what you're hoping for in the end, that's not a bad thing. It will get smaller as it goes through the firing process, both the bisque firing process and the glaze firing. So after this, I'm just going to smush it down. You're also going to need your sponge and a bucket of water. And right now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to just use the sponge to clean up the edges to make them a little nicer. So right now it's all cracked. My sponge it's not soaking wet, it's just damp. out. So I'm just working on top of a piece of newspaper to kind of mimic what I'm asking you guys to do at home. You can make this into any shape that you want. You don't have to smush it down. You can smush it and then you can cut something out of it. All right, so now you can see the edges aren't cracked anymore. So now I'm gonna take my tool. I'm gonna start with, because I like a radial pattern, I'm gonna start with a circle in the middle. And then I'm gonna use my tool to impress into the clay to start to create a texture. Depending on how I hold the tool, can make the same point look different. So that is how it looks when I press this way. But when I flip the tool around and I press the other way, I can create a different look going towards the center. So same tool, same tip, different look depending on whether I was pushing it in or pushing it out. I can also create a different look by changing the degree that I hold it at. So let's see, if I want something that is a little more, that's a little smaller and a little more shallow, I can hold the tool up higher. So I sort of got just like a little triangle. Let's try this 3-1. So from here, I'm just gonna play around and hold my tool at different angles, change the direction of it, and just try and see what I can come up with. Let's say you make something and you completely don't like it, you can just smush it up and start over. Not that I didn't like that, I just wanted to show you guys you could smush it up and start over. All right, so you'd want to go through the smoothing process all over again when you're all finished creating your texture. So I'm just going to go through and let's see, what did that one look like? Oh, that's pretty. So I'll just put a texture in here fast to show you how to finish them up. So when you're all finished putting in your texture, you can go back and smooth up the edges if you have any cracks. Anything that's not smoothed over could become sharp. So even if you like how, you know, those edges look like that, you still want to make them, at least with your finger, so that they are not sharp. Sharp just looks like poor craftsmanship. So I'm okay with something looking a little rustic, but sharp is just says lazy to me. All right, so then the straw, what is the straw for? So you have to figure out a way to hang these. So you're gonna pick a spot and you can just use a straw to push down into the clay, put your finger in the back, kind of wiggle it through, and then just pull it back out and you'll be left with a hole. You can choose to have just one hole. If you wanted to hang multiples from a strand, you could put 2 holes in so that you could weave the string through it or hang it from the sides, or you have to figure out how you want your pieces to hang. It's important to figure that out before you get started, because if you, like I said before, once the clay starts to dry out, if you haven't put a hole in it, it's kind of really hard to start to put that, or it's really hard to try and put that hole in the clay after it's bone dry. Most likely your piece will crack. So you got to figure out where you want your holes to begin, how you plan on hanging them, make them interesting, try out different tools from around your house. This was my son's chocolate milk straw from dinner. So he bit it into an oval. So if I wanted to do something that sort of made like a petal shape, all right, you get the idea. Experiment, play around with different things. Try cutting the tip into possibly knot points. Let's try a curve. Well, let's just try it without having cut it at all and see what happens. So just having that curve. You can make an interesting pattern as well, or you can work with geometric shapes. It's up to you. Figure out the look that you want. Play around with different textures. Experiment until you find something that you like. You have some time to work on this. If we were in class, this would probably take you a week to finish. So I'm going to give you a week in class and at home to get these done. And I will actually give you a more solid answer on time. But I want you to have fun and I want you to experiment, playing around with different textures and doing different things. All right, wrapping up, if you are completely finished with your project, you can just leave them to dry flat. Because they are thin and small, we don't have to do anything special for drying. For projects in the future, each project that we do is going to have a different way to dry depending on what it is we are creating. For these thin, flat, simple pieces, they can just go straight to drying. The one thing that you want to make sure that you do at some point, not necessarily when they're super wet, so right after you made them is not always the best time to do this. You want to carve your name into the back. So these are ones that I just made. To carve your name into the back, I have this bamboo skewer. It is for like on the grill, you know, bamboo skewer. You can just use something with a point to carve your name into the back. The more wet the clay is, the sloppier your name is going to look. So there's mine. You see all those little like clay crumbs? If you let the clay dry out for a couple of hours and then come back and carve your name into it, you won't get all those crumbs. But if you think you're gonna forget and not come back to carve your name into it, then carve your name in, and once it sets up and once it's dry, use something to kind of brush those crumbs away. Like I said, if you wait though, you will get a neater line. If you are not finished working on them and you want to come back to them later, you've run out of time, you have to go to your next class, you want to use a piece of plastic. If I was not able to give you plastic at this time, a piece of saran wrap from your kitchen or anything really besides a grocery store bag. Grocery store bags don't work. They are porous and your pieces will dry out. Maybe not right away, but eventually they will. You want to use a piece of plastic, so a simple piece of saran wrap will work fine. And you are just going to cover over them to wrap them up. This is where I told you to put them somewhere safe because they just look like nothing's in there. So if somebody was to put something heavy on top of them, they might get messed up. So make sure you put them somewhere safe. And then once you are completely done working on them, you can leave them uncovered to dry out. Like I said, that works for this project. It will not work for future projects. It won't work for all projects that we work on. So these are done. I'm just gonna let them lay flat to dry out. Yeah, that's it. Okay, enjoy.